So what became clear to me as I processed all of that is that we talked about patient capital in Investor Circle as a kind of aspirational alternative to venture capital, but I knew that where we really wanted to go was someplace deeper, and eventually the term nurture capital kind of arose. And what would a nurture capital industry look like? Well, this is what I hope we'll spend time talking about in a few minutes, because there's a whole bunch of ideas about new ways of intermediating at the local level, and none of them actually exist yet. So these are all just ideas, but I can tell you that we as a Slow Money Alliance are going to try to make these things real, among other things. So what would it look like if there was, I'm calling this a CSI PRI fund. Now that's a lot of, well, you know what the CSA is. A PRI fund is a fund that a foundation, by IRS regulations right now, I'm not going to say the whole story because it may be too much detail. I don't want to get in the weeds unless you want to when we talk about it. But a foundation right now is allowed under the IRS to make certain below market, usually loans, to things that are consistent with their mission and count them as grants. I know it sounds very arcane, and it is a very sad commentary on how convoluted philanthropy and capital markets are. But what this really means is, what if we had a philanthropic fund in which all the dollars that came in were donations, and then all those dollars were, I'm just making this up right now, invested in the next 5,000 CSAs in the United States, and what if it lost 20% of its principal? Remember, all the dollars that came in the top were philanthropic donations, so those people are not expecting returns. So I see a lot of like non-nodding going on. So let's go to the next one. What if there were slow munis, municipal bonds, that allowed all of us to invest $1,000 or $5,000 or $10,000 in a diversified portfolio of sustainable food enterprises in our region? Now that one, I see some nods going on that one. That one is not asking you to do charity, not asking you to take a negative rate of return. That would be, we'd have to demonstrate that you can make a 3%, a 4% tax advantage return. So we have just barely begun discussions with our first city, it happens to be Madison, Wisconsin, about whether they'd like to help us figure out, if that's feasible. Regional investment co-ops, what the hell is that? There is none. Some people in Santa Fe are trying to start one. So the idea being, what if there was a co-op model for allowing regional investors to pool $1,000, $5,000, $10,000 apiece and participate in funding a number of sustainable ventures in their region? Organic farmland is there because it's just kind of another whole category. Well, if we're trying to save and restore local food systems, if we don't pay attention to the farmland piece, what the heck are we doing? We're losing, we all know, well, I mean, there was a poster, is Surfrider, is that, okay, there's farmland that needs to be preserved. There's almost no capital. Statistically, again, if you look at things like the amount of the USDA budget that goes to organics, the amount of philanthropy in this country, here's a good one. There's $50 billion a year. Well, there was until, no, I'm not saying that's a joke. I mean, I don't know what the numbers will be now. Let's assume it's going to go down by 40 or 50% probably this year. But up until this correction or this crash, there was $50 billion a year being given away by professionally managed endowments in this country. Anybody want to guess what percentage of that? You can either guess the percentage or the dollars that went to sustainable agriculture. We have 0.5%. Can anyone lower that? 0.1%, $50 million out of $50 billion went to sustainable agriculture. Basically, the environment as a whole, it is astonishing. In this age when we're giving the Nobel Prize to Al Gore for telling us to worry about it, there is no philanthropy going to the environment. It's all going to colleges and hospitals and poverty reduction and disaster relief, I mean, a bunch of important things. But very little is actually going to any systemic change of environmental nature. And there's no organized capital market of any scale at all to try to preserve farmland. There's the American Farmland Trust, and there are a few local regional farmland trusts, but statistically they don't add up to anything of any order of magnitude. So what we need to do, if we're going to create some sort of a nurture capital industry to be a complement to the venture capital industry, we are going to have to figure out how to start steering meaningful amounts of capital in these new ways. And what we're viewing slow money as, if you don't already have the picture, is as a catalyst, an incubator, trying to come up with new system design ideas that, if any one of them works, could steer billions of dollars in a new way. We want to try a whole bunch of different things. If any one of them works, they could just proliferate wildly around the country, and the brass ring here would be to have lots of local investors investing in lots of local food enterprises and local farms, and disintermediating. We don't want to be in the middle of it. We just want to catalyze it. We're a nonprofit, so we're just trying to catalyze it and get out of the way. So what's our mission? To support entrepreneurship that preserves and restores soil fertility, appropriate scale organic farming, and local food communities, and to catalyze the development of the nurture capital industry, entrepreneurial finance that promotes cultural, economic, and ecological health and diversity. Almost done here. Just a few kind of last remarks, and then we can have a discussion. This is, when I wrote the book, this was one of the last things I did in like connecting a few paragraphs where I wrote the word small food enterprises, and then I wrote or SFEs. How many people know like the acronyms for like, small and medium-sized enterprises or micro, MSMEs? These are all acronyms that exist in microfinance and lending in developing countries, right? But I realized I've never seen the acronym SFE, and it occurred to me that small food enterprises, well, actually, hang on, I think I actually went to this slide in my mind, which is okay. Just look at the first bullet here. If they can be recognized as a class, capital can be catalyzed. Small food enterprises, by which I'm talking about everything from CSAs to small organic brands to local processing to preserving organic farms, all of these things need to be understood as a category. And once we understand them as a category, maybe we can actually organize capital markets to support them. Right now, it's kind of like industrial finance, venture capital is like a telescope. It's really good at looking at like distant markets, strange objects in the sky that we can shoot billions of dollars at, right? But if you turn the telescope down to try to look at your feet, you don't see anything. And we need a different lens to look at the small food enterprise and figure out how to support them. I'm going back here. So I like to think of these small food enterprises as the earthworms in the soil of the economy. How many are there? Tens of thousands of them, just one little category, which is fairly high up the food chain of small food enterprises. There are more than 1,000 organic food companies with revenues of 2 to 10 million. And I put the phrase terrestrial growth objectives as a little bit of a joke, meaning companies that aren't trying to grow to multinational scale. The vast majority of these entrepreneurs are not trying to become billionaires. They are trying to grow decent-sized businesses that deliver quality products to niche markets. But really lower down on the food chain are the real companies we want to shoot at. So here are some names. Most of them won't mean anything to you, but a few of them will. High Mowing Organic Seeds, Pete's Greens, these are Vermont companies. Vermont Smoke and Cured, Jasper Hill Farm, American Flatbread, Butterworks Farm. I have to stop on that one. That's my poster child for a sustainable food enterprise. It's a 35-year-old, one family, one farm, 325 acres, about 10 miles south of the Canadian border in Vermont. Has anybody ever had the product? Just curious. You have anything to say about the product? You better say it's, oh, no, you're not a real lover of the, you're not evangelical like I am? No, all right. Well, as an investor in Stonyfield, I feel empowered to say that this is a vastly superior product. Stonyfield is the best organic yogurt you can get from a company that makes $400 million worth of yogurt a year. And it's a very good product. I'm nothing against Stonyfield. Butterworks is $1 million a year yogurt business on a farm where they import no inputs. Almost none. I mean, it may not be absolutely zero, but it's almost zero, meaning they grow all their own feed, 60 cows that are from their own herd. They are completely committed to being a sustainable farm operation, and when they got to their limit, meaning all they can do is make $1 million a year yogurt, that's all they can do, that's what they do. And it's a beautiful artisan product. If you compare that product to a jar of Stonyfield, I believe most people will conclude that it's more alive and has more distinct taste and whatever. But whatever you think about the product, the enterprise itself, I would argue, is the key to the future health of our economy. Why? We would like to create 500 Butterworks farms, not another Stonyfield farm yogurt. That's what we need. We want a Butterworks farm in every county in the United States. Now, is that going to be easy? No, but it's also not rocket science. Farmer's Diner, White Dog Cafe, Swantonberry Farm up the coast here, Cowgirl Creamery, you probably know that one, Coast of Maine Organic. So the point is just to give you an idea, there are lots of these small enterprises out there. I think you all know that CSAs are underdeveloped in the US. I'm not sure if you do here. There are a couple of thousand CSAs in the US. Even though there's been a lot of growth, it hasn't even begun to penetrate the market yet. The vast majority of them are tiny, have maybe a few dozen members, and don't amount to anything economically. Only the top, let's say 5% of them are businesses, as you would understand, meaning let's say have 100,000 or 200,000 in revenues or more. The last point maybe is worth just mentioning. Social investors are hungry for next generation pure plays that go beyond SRI screens and offer real alternatives to the stock market. So finally, what the heck are we doing? I don't know how we're doing on time, first of all. I guess we're not that bad. So I'm going to wrap up in about 5 minutes. I want to just tell you what we are trying to do. I'm happy to get into more details if that's the way the conversation goes, but if not, at least you'll kind of have the gestalt of how we are trying to do this.